Gosh. Well, yeah. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here with you. Um, I'm bringing in one of my favorite topics, which is how, as a generalist, you can take this big, wonderful background of yours, and turn that into a story that, in my use case, you might use to start working for yourself. I think what's also cool is even if you don't ever want to or end up working for yourself, this type of professional storytelling is awesome for full-time jobs too. So what I'll say at the top of this, I'll share this stuff again throughout, but this workshop is kind of loosely based on a Substack article I wrote. There's the link, and it has a workbook to go with it today. Here's what that workbook will look like when you open it up. You'll come on in, click File, make a copy. We'll use this a little later in the session, but you can get a jump start on this here as I'm winding my way through an intro. So, with that, let's jump into it. I'm Shaina. I'm the founder now of two companies, both of which are building the infrastructure for people to build fulfilling, independent work lives, build a myriad of income streams in their own portfolio career. Hello Generalist was my first. I started about 4 years ago. It's a bootstrapped marketplace for startups to hire part-time operators, part-time generalists on their team. We've paid out millions to the fractionals on our platform, which is wild. I've helped hundreds of great companies hire people part-time. And that led me to start Manual Override, which is my latest venture. Manual Override is a 6-week accelerator that helps people who are building independent businesses make them sustainable, formalize them, grow them, push them forward. Um, Both HG and MO are communities at their core. So these are some pictures from events over the years. And let's see here. Prior, I've, most recently been in the tech world. I was chief of staff at Yelp for a few years and took a venture-backed startup from their seed stage all the way through acquisition. But at my core, I'm very much a windy career person throughout. I opened a food truck at one point. I was on tour without standing in the field for many years, setting dinners on farm fields all around the world. So my story, though maybe artful now, comes from maybe where you are, which is a big windy gobbly mess of stuff. And then otherwise, I live in London with my family. I have a 6-month-old baby. So if anyone is a new parent, hit me up. We should talk. And kind of the like very obvious on the nose thing to say is that I'm joining you in particular today of all days, because we're in this final push to bring people together for our spring manual override cohort. Um, this is a snippet from some of the content that we teach. So if this is interesting to you and you want more, there's a link to an info session here. Our last one is tomorrow. So come join us and hear more about it, or check out the website. Um, and I'll leave my plug like that and move along. So, okay, by means of kind of understanding who's in the room, we're going to play a little game. I'm going to stop sharing here in a second. This game is easiest if your camera is on, but we can work around it if you're not in a place where you can turn your camera on. Basically, what I'm going to do, I'll stop sharing here so we can see each other. We're going to play a game called the thumb game. You need your thumb and you need the camera, or if you don't want to do camera on, you can give an emoji along the way. And in a minute, you're all going to kind of cover your camera with your thumb, and I'm going to ask a question. If you're in that bucket, remove your thumb, kind of revealing yourself to be part of that group, and we'll all kind of understand what's going on there. So let's give it a try. It's easier in practice. So thumbs up if your camera's on. Otherwise, camera off. Play with us as you can. My first question is take your thumb down if you are just curious about independent work, curious about fractional, curious about working for yourself, but haven't done anything about it yet. So lots of thumbs off, lots of people off camera. Okay, cool. Thumbs back up. Take your thumb down if anybody is already doing independent work, fractional work, coaching work, getting paid for writing or speaking or workshops. Yeah, okay. So maybe an equal amount there. So pretty solid. Okay, thumbs back up. Of that last group, people that are already doing independent work, who's been doing it for more than a year? Thumb down, more than a year. Okay, more than 2 years? More than 3 years? Yeah, okay, cool. So some real vets in the group. That's amazing. Um, Very good. That's a helpful gut check. But what I think is cool about positioning work is that even if you've been doing this a long time, there's always room to sharpen up your approach. So I hope you'll get some value from this too. Um, Here, let's see, my screen is back up. You can see my slide deck again. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Here's what we're going to do today. There's three main topics and then some room for discussion. First, we're going to spend some time talking about portfolio careers, what they are, why I think generalists were made for them. Next, we're going to do some actual positioning work in the workbook, where you're going to explore a couple different ways that I think generalists can tell their story, both through a categorical approach and then through a story arc approach. We'll work on both. And then last, we'll come back together for some discussion and Q&A. In no way will you walk away from today with like a ready to ship perfect positioning statement, but I hope you'll walk away with some new tools, some new inspiration, and then the workbook, which you can take and really spend your time with as you leave. So with that, let's jump right into it and talk right about why I think portfolio careers are really made for generalists. Portfolio careers, they are a thing. In case you haven't heard of this phrase before, portfolio career is a professional path made up of many income streams as opposed to just one full-time job. For some, their portfolio is all independent work. That's me, for example. I think that's Millie as well. Fractional work, coaching work, a community, speaking work, teaching online. For others, this might be some independent work plus a full-time job. For others, still, their independent streams all kind of rhyme with each other under a common story. And for others, they're all over the place. They're separate. There's no one right way to build this, which I love. And to kind of think about it in a visual sense, this comes from Reid Hoffman's book and Ben Cosnocha's book, The Startup of You. They have three terms that they use here. A laser career to mean I've got one main thing, like a full-time job. What they call a main thing career, which is like your main thing plus a side thing, but you've got one main thing. And then portfolio careers, which are many parts and many pieces added up. There's a way to kind of think about where you are, what you might be envisioning here. For some examples of a portfolio career, this is mine and Harry's. Harry is my business partner in Manual Override. We make our living from several income streams all independently. Harry does workshops, does coaching, does fractional work, and is building Manual Override with me. Hello Generalist to me is a productized service. It's still just me solo building it. And then I also offer coaching work, of course, building Manual Override with him. So you can kind of get a sense of what this looks like and feels like. And as you might already be thinking, in a professional path where you have all of these different modes where you get to work, um, generalists and our skill set here are really made for this, where there are very literal, practical opportunities for you to apply your many skills, not just as someone running the business that is managing all of these modes, but actually executing and doing these modes at play here. Um, and yet, despite the breadth that portfolio careers allow, I think generalists run into one really big problem, which is that in order to build a lasting, profitable, interconnected, interdependent portfolio career, you need to overcome this big dilemma, which is how do I get to a point where a customer looks at you and your work and like throws their hands up in the air and exclaims like, "Oh my God, this person was put on earth to help me." The anti-goal and the hard thing to avoid is if you are offering anything to anyone and not telling the story in a way that helps you stand out to a particular customer. You just create more questions. You create uncertainty for a customer, where in this type of service work, they want certainty that you're the one. So the generalist dilemma here, as we get into this, there's two big things to overcome. I wrote about this in the article, but I talk about them as emotional challenges of telling your story in a way that stands out to someone as, my God, they're the person for me. Emotional challenges like, I don't want to pick something. I do a lot of things well. I want variety in my work. This is why I quit my full-time job in the first place. I don't want to undersell my abilities. I do a bunch of stuff. And then tactical challenges that are hard to like pick a thing off your resume that has many things, or tactical challenges like, how do I show credibility in something where maybe I don't have the same 20 years experience in it, someone else does. Tactical challenges like fears of missing out on opportunities when you might just really need cash and money for it. And my big theory, my big answer here is that while most people cannot actually monetize every skill in their arsenal because you only have 24 hours in your day, portfolio careers allow you to go pretty broad. The trick is in the storytelling and positioning. So I really do believe that the link here between getting a generalist into a portfolio career is finding the way to tell the story. So let's start to do it. This is the section where you'll want that workbook. So let me drop it in the chat again here. Here's the workbook. Go on in, file, make a copy, and then you'll have your workbook to work on as we go through this here. Okay, so positioning. Before we do it, let's just define it. Um, you're probably familiar with the tenets of positioning here. In that positioning is a series of statements that says who your customer is, what problem you solve, and so on and so on and so on. Positioning tenets help you craft a very intentional message directly to that customer that helps you build your service for that particular customer. And to think about what it's not, what we're not trying to do here is write a tagline like 15, you save 15% in 15 minutes or less with Geico. That's not what we're doing. We're not trying to write a fancy marketing slogan where startups come to hire generalists. Fractional generalists would be like hello generalists. And it's also not just a list of services. It's not just saying I'm a fractional chief of staff, for example. What positioning is something pretty specific. Positioning is a series of categories of who your customer is, what problem or problems you solve for them, and how you go about solving that problem, formatted into a bunch of different blurbs and sentences that you get to use in all sorts of places. So you can think about three building blocks that we're going to work toward that you're going to employ in a bunch of different ways. Those building blocks are a customer, who your customer is, a problem or problems of what you fix or solve for that customer, and a service, what you actually do. Um, I think this work is under the category of things that are not complex to understand, but are hard to do in practice. So, not complex work, but hard work. Um, some examples of what that might look like. These are some starting point examples. We'll come back to richer ones. But here's one. I'm a fractional chief of staff to early stage technical founders. I build the first finance and HR functions and take on miscellaneous projects that need doing. Prior, I did this inside X, Y, and Z teams. Another one, I'm a first operations hire for AI companies. I work part-time with founders. I'll own all the back office operations from blah, 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 blah. And prior, I did this and blah, 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 blah. So start to kind of paint a picture in your mind of maybe some of the myths or hesitations you had coming into this, which is though we are defining a customer and though we are picking services and problems, they're still pretty broad in nature. But the act that we're doing here is still working to carve that corner out of what we are uniquely great at, and name it and claim it. So we're going to go through two exercises to get there. This first exercise is about kind of analyzing the categories in your background that you might want to highlight. Um, those categories that we're going to look at are environments you've worked in, are problems you've solved, and things you've built. And as we work through them, I'm going to put some timers up and give you time in the workbook to explore these things. What you might find at the end is that you might stand out or spike in one of these. There may be something from the environments that stand out where you go, oh, interesting. I actually am passionate about that particular environment. I want to do more here, or I have a lot to talk about and offer here. Or perhaps there's some things you've built that as you look at this list, you realize, oh, there's some really interesting threads here that may be the starting point for me to tell my story around. That's the point that we're looking for here. You may not spike in all of these categories. There may not be a clear, compelling story that you want to pull out or you think is interesting. That's okay. That's not the point. The point is instead to examine your experience in this way and see what you might find. So um, let's start. First, we're going to look at customers that you might solve, that you might work for, or customers that you're already working for. And we want to categorize these in a few easy to understand, easy to storytell around names. Um, a couple examples are business models that you've worked with or have worked with before, want to work with, marketplaces, SaaS companies, AI companies, funding environments like nonprofit or venture backed or bootstrapped, certain industries like restaurant, tech, whatever it might be. I want to challenge you to get uncomfortably specific as you work through these. And with that, I'm going to slap a timer up and give you a chance to just start brain dumping into this workbook. What stands out to you and who that target customer might be? All right, a couple seconds left just to wrap up your thinking on this first one. And we're going to move forward here. Um, Another category to start thinking about and potentially storytelling around is problems that you've solved for these particular customers. Maybe you've solved problems that fall under the category of making more money for businesses. And you might specify what you did that helped them make more money. Maybe you helped them save money and what you did there. Maybe you helped them adopt a new philosophy or point of view. Perhaps you helped them do any number, get organized in the face of absolute chaos of growing 100 miles an hour. Um, this is your chance to kind of use that workbook, start to list out all of these problems that you solved and some notions around the problems, when they show up, what the problems feel like, and so on. So, a minute on the clock. Let's start reflecting there. Right, a couple seconds left to get to a stopping point. All right. And clearly, we're going to move fast through this. Um, Jogging over to our next prompt, our next potential angle for you to storytell around is what you do for them. There's a bunch of ways to talk about how you might do this work. You might use familiar names like models of work, like I'm a fractional so and so, or I'll do a project for you, or I have a resource for you. Your work might be easily named as a function like finance or internal operations. The best are people that can find clear, specific names around what they actually do. I hire engineers. I manage your accountants. I build all your internal systems. So, in the same vein, we're going to put a minute up on the clock. We're here on prompt three of what you do to solve those problems. Continue with this like active list making for yourself here, um, reflecting on how you actually get that work done. About 5 seconds on the clock. Okay. So, what you're probably looking at on this sheet of paper is like a bunch of stuff, a long list of things. And I think for the extra generalists, maybe your list feels very nonsensical or hard to connect. Um, I think at this point, what you would do with a journal, with a friend, with a loved one is look at that list and start to look for trends, start to look for places. Though you have an aspiration to build a portfolio career with lots of different streams and places and potential customers, we still want to pick one to get started with. So, what you're looking at this stage is where am I interested? Where do I want to spend my time? Where am I, what problems am I really good at solving that I could sell and take to market? And where do I think those match up to where there might be a market at play here? Um, for those that maybe there is a trend that's emerging right off the bat, you've got a good initial thread to start pulling on. Um, to layer onto this a little bit more, in case you're not already aware, as someone that's in the skills-based business that we're talking about here, you're in the business of selling yourself, of selling your own skills. And people hire people, full stop. Even if you're maybe scheming about building a big agency, a bigger company, a bigger brand, your first 20 customers will hire you and your story. You don't have to have a big laundry list of customers and achievements and trend lines to fall back on. We're just trying to show who you are in a particular way that tells a story that leads those people to you. So, what we want here is as you're thinking about that trend that you might want to chase down from those categories or from something off the sheet of paper, we want to pull out the punchiest, most relevant, juiciest parts of your story or your point of view that would speak to those customers. We want to start cutting and trimming things that don't matter as much to that customer. This is the act of kind of purposely sharing the nuances of your background that add to the story of your business. And there's kind of 2 points to reflect on here. What's relevant, if you're asking yourself that, is points that of your story that your customer will want to emulate or relate to or will build trust in, or your unique point of view. In a world where there's tons of fractionals, why you? Why you as a fractional COO or HR person or community leader or agency owner? Um, this work, all this stuff takes longer than a minute. This work will definitely take you longer than a minute, but I'll still put a minute up in good faith to get you started here. We're back in the workbook, and you're going to start to think about ways that demonstrate this. Perhaps you've had some experience with a brand name that does the work of credibility building for you. Perhaps you've had titles in the past that reflect the work you want to do. Maybe there's great results. You can tie a number around and share that. Um, and maybe there's some things that immediately come to mind for you that show your point of view or that stand out and help you answer why you. So I'll give you a minute here just to get started on the note taking.
Shayna, someone just said, would you mind a quick recap of this task, but maybe time's up?
Cool. Kanice, I am glad to help you after school here, if you'd like. So message me on Slack. I'm in the Generalist World community. Okay. We've kind of reached a point where we're gonna talk about all this stuff now. And I can feel some of the itch in the chat emerging of there's a lot here and the minute is too short. But before we jump into some open discussion, I've got a quick video for you. This is Ariel. She's first round reviews marketer in residence. She's helped hundreds and hundreds of startups with positioning, and you as taking your skills to market are an entrepreneur. So let's listen to it on what Ariel says as just an initial reflection point for some of the things you have written down. Give me a big thumbs down if you cannot hear this.
How do you make sure you're not using like BS buzzwords in your storytelling? Like, how do you get to real substance?
People want to use jargon because everyone else is using jargon. So I was working on this one company. They literally were like, I know you're going to tell us to take out the jargon, but in our industry, we have to use these words in order to be relevant. And I'm like, okay. And so maybe that's true. And there are certain words that like your target user or your target customer is really going to understand, but those words are not community and leverage and enable and empower. But I think we have to fight the good fight and, try to get people to stick to substance. It has to kind of feel like therapy. You know how like you can go to a therapist and they say like stuff and they just nod their head and like it's not that helpful.
Yeah.
And then have you ever been to one where you're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. You think and you like go home and you sleep on it and you have dreams about it and then the next day you feel better. Like that's your job as a marketer, right?
Okay. Yeah, Millie's getting at my point here. My riff on Ariel's point of view is a phrase I talk about a lot, which is corporate poetry. And you know it when you hear it. It's like these are the systems that enable systemic growth and the synergies for your data. And like a big one with operations people is turning chaos into clarity. Like these sound nice on the surface, but they take up space that you could be using to talk more directly about your customer, about their problem, or about what you literally do to help them. Um, Often this exercise is one of like bashing everybody on the head to say, stop trying to sound like a fancy marketer. Just talk, use the language you use to talk about what you do all day. Just like I build HR systems and I also do finance work and spreadsheets and I help. And when I do that stuff, I solve these problems. So the antidote to a lot of this fluffy stuff that a lot of generalists get caught up into is specificity. The more specific, the better. Specific here does not mean specialized. Specific here means precise language to talk about all the things you do. Um, okay, before we can jump into the next section, let's take like 5, maybe 7 minutes and talk about what's going on with you all so far. So, in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we can chat out loud. Um, how is this going? How was it to look at your experience categorically? What came up for you? Especially if you're like feeling really lost, that'll help everybody learn even more. So
Oh,
be brave.
I can go.
Great.
My name is Alexandra. I actually put this in the chat. So, um, I I struggle to position myself because I have two things that I feel like I'm really good at, which is that when I come into a company, like I can immediately tell like what they need to work on and fix. So I've helped people with like product reprioritization, like fixing the roadmap, fixing the team alignment, and it is never my job. I just kind of like love talking to people. So then it just happens. Also with stakeholder management, going into meetings and being able to convince people to go along with whatever, I or my teammates suggest. And then the other thing is I did coaching and I used to help people with like pitching and public speaking as well as the coaching. So sometimes it was to get a job, sometimes it was to speak at a conference. And I loved doing that. And I just kind of like struggle because I would love to like pitch myself to do both of these different offers. But when I write my LinkedIn bio, I'm always like, how do I describe this? This is so hard. So yeah, that's what I'm dealing with right now.
That's cool. Well, you're already like what I always listen for is like, can I understand who their customer is, what problem they solve for that customer, and how they go about solving it? And you've got the building blocks of a lot of that in what you just said for both the what sounds like the embedded product work or project management work you do with companies, and then also the one-on-one coaching you do with speakers or potential speakers. Um, are they the same customer or are they very different customers?
Not always, actually. When I was doing coaching, my main customers were engineers and sometimes product managers, but then they could also be like scientists. I had a lot of scientists. But yeah, a lot of people in technology.
Yeah. And then for your kind of, I'm going to call it project management work. That's probably maybe not the word you would use, but is that, should I use it? How would you talk about the first part of the work that you're doing?
It's kind of like it's a combination of UX and product strategy. It's looking at so it's like a product management role,
Product
but
management.
also yeah, it's very product management. Yeah.
Great. So for the product management work you do, your customer there are technology companies and maybe some more specificity about stage and size and kind of the type of product that they're building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I can answer. That's not a question, right? Sure.
I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around it.
Yeah, the last one I worked at was a big AI scale up. So lots of funding, but not a lot of alignment on what to do with that money.
Love it. Love that as a problem statement. Uh,
Yeah.
it sounds like you've got two mostly different customers. You've got a corporation who's buying from you, and then you have individuals who are probably buying from you. So I wonder, like, maybe there's a world with like our story arcs that you find an artful way to tie it all together, and you feel nice about that. But it's the line that you might want to pick is like, I have two different customers. Maybe they're both finding me on LinkedIn and I need a way to speak to both of them at the same time on LinkedIn, but maybe not. Maybe they're finding me through other channels and other places. And um, instead of trying to fit in some artful one-liner, zippy one-liner about why the two relate, you might not need to do that work. You can just go about your business of selling to one customer and selling to the other and doing so on the channels that are meaningful. Um, maybe that story arc for you with two very different products and very different customers, maybe that's helpful. Maybe it's a personal
Yeah.
satisfaction piece.
Yeah. I mean, I will tell you, it is hard to get that I've worked on the headline for LinkedIn so many times to try to, and it just kind of makes me look like I don't know what I'm doing because it makes it look like I'm doing, but I do very much know that I have these two offers and two skills, but
Yeah.
I like them both. So it's kind of,
Something
yeah.
interesting here that I see people do is like instead of trying to on the surface name everything about both services and both companies, instead talk about who you are at the surface, like
Mm.
something about your story, your background, your accomplishments, and it's like because I've lived this life, I now have been called to help these two groups of people, and this is what I do. So maybe that's an arc that kind of serves that LinkedIn function for you. Although beyond that, I don't know if it like one customer won't benefit. Maybe there's some crossover here, but the real intricate marketer dance of trying to relate them may not be a problem you need to worry too much about, is my instinct.
That's good to hear. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that makes sense that it could just be, I have an idea about how to combine them, but I also think that even if I can combine it like in the body or in my posts on LinkedIn, the headline, maybe I shouldn't worry so much about the headline.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all good. Like if you've got a great way to speak to your customer and they understand you and your mission and what you're uniquely great at, without touching each one of those services precisely, that's a totally fine way to go about this too. Um, that's cool. Alex, thank you for raising your hand to share.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you. I appreciate it a lot.
Shayna, we had a couple of questions. Is this a good time?
let's go through the story arc,
Cool.
so we kind of give everybody a chance, and then we'll come back to it and save. We'll probably have a solid 10 minutes here to do discussion, if that feels right. Well,
Yes, let's roll.
another kind of path, if you're looking at all of these categories and this categorical approach kind of isn't feeling right for you, another angle is what I call the story arc. Story arcs are a way of acting as umbrellas that hold the theme behind your portfolio career. So if you're Alex, you're maybe thinking about what sort of arc can I use to contain all of my little nuggets of what I do for all these different customers. Um, I think about these story arcs as especially helpful for generalists, um, because they don't immediately force you to get at your headline name everything that we just went through. They're bigger buckets to hold bigger, broader missions and bigger, broader work. Um, Three story arcs here. The first is around what we call task or functional focus. So you kind of pick the thing that you're really excellent at. You got a lot to say about it. It winds its way through all of the work that you want to do, and you frame your story around that. Um, the second way, customer category focus, anchoring around a certain type of company, an environment, an industry. This was me in my early fractional work. My background, I feel like 15 years of helping companies that do stuff with restaurants and food. So I leaned into this early on and kind of framed my arc that way. And the third way is what I call a shared mission. Mission being something you want to see changed in the world, or mission being a problem to solve. So something like climate tech companies, or something like SMB profitability. I want to solve that problem, perhaps. As you go back and you look at me and Harry's portfolio careers, you can kind of think about all of these different paths under two really clear story arcs. Harry's follows a real task oriented arc, and to some extent a problem that he's solving. All of his nodes are about AI and helping businesses integrate AI into what they do. And for me, it's about helping leaders build independent businesses. Um, for Harry and I both, this is our second or our third iteration of this. We've changed and morphed it over time as we've learned things about what we do and what works and what we want. So I want to lend you a real attitude of um, it's a hypothesis, it's not a tattoo. You're going to try stuff on, you're going to learn about it, you're going to change. Here they are again. Like what we've done before, we're going to do one last minute on the clock here for you just to sit quietly with this, start to reflect on like, okay, is there a particular arc I might lean into? What thoughts do I have about that initially? So I'll give you a minute on the clock. We're right back in the workbook, and then we'll come back and talk about all this. That was so violent. Um, Time's up, if you can't tell by the incredible clicking sound there. Um, we have going to reach the end of the exercises. Um, I think as we've got, 14 minutes or so, I'm going to play one more little video for you for one more outside perspective on this, and then we really will come back together and do some chatting. So like last time, big thumbs down if you cannot hear this.
The way that you talk about your business probably sucks and you don't even know it. Last week, I sat through what was probably one of the better workshops I've ever been in, where it became painfully obvious the problem that founders and marketers have when they talk about their business or service and how to fix this. Now, this session was led by my guy, Sean Puri, who you may know from My First Million, and he has a track record of building very successful businesses. So here are 3, maybe 4 takeaways from that session. The first is when asked what your business does, people will often describe it very literally. I have a branding and design agency that designs for CPG brands. But this is a problem for 2 reasons. 1, 1,000 other agencies say that. And 2, it doesn't really stand out. So the first way is to reframe it by using the format of we help X do Y. So maybe I would say we help launch consumer brands through great design. And he would say, yeah, but that's still not specific or interesting enough. And the more that you can probe or push, the easier it is for you to arrive at something distinct and memorable. But as a starting point, always try to frame things in terms of we help X people get some kind of Y outcome. The second, and what I really loved, is this idea of working backwards from the killer claim. So what he said is, what claim could you make that if it were true would open up a floodgate of customers for your business? And how can you reverse engineer that to make that true? So a killer claim that I think of, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. That's not only sticky, memorable, and distinct, but that is a killer claim that maybe Geico at some point said, hey, if we can get this down to 15 minutes, that's going to differentiate us from all of the other insurance providers on the market. Number 3, this can get a little bit dicey because sometimes it gets overused, but especially if you're building in a new category, it can often be helpful to speak about what you do by analogy. So there was this period 10 years ago where people were building Uber for everything, Uber for food, Uber for pet care. It's just one helpful thing to try. And then the last thing that he said, which I think is interesting and comes more naturally to some people than it does others, but especially in the earlier days of building your business, every time people ask you about it, try to give them a slightly different pitch each time. Because basically what you're doing is A/B testing this by seeing what reactions you get from people, seeing what sticks, what makes the most sense to them. So don't be too wedded to like one sentence or whatever your initial elevator pitch is. So do these things and you'll like improve what you're saying by 100%.
Good old Schwinnebago on TikTok for those of us on the clock app. Lots of wisdom in there. My encouragement to you as you're working through this is keep with those basics, who my customer is, what problem I solve for them, and what I do to solve that problem. And then there's all of these additive ways you can try out and try on for size to see what might work for you. That's kind of the end of my content here. We've got a solid 10 minutes left. I'm going to stop sharing so we can all just have a chat. And Millie, maybe you can help me with any questions or anything we just want to talk about.
Yeah, let's start with two maybe quick ones. Number one, is it helpful to think about what's in it for them when we describe what outcomes we deliver on?
Oh, big time. Yeah. And so that's where the problems that you're solving, um, just like all these other parts, you want to be testing and getting that big exclamatory, oh my God, you are the person I've been waiting for reaction, because you're using language that matters to your customer. So this is where specificity really comes in. I'm not saying I build operations. I'm saying no, um, in my case, when I was doing fractional work, for companies that are selling to software to restaurants, I make sure that you've got all of these different operating pieces that I know help you get closer to your customer, understand their profitability and pain points, understand how, so on and so on and so on. And I'm using language that comes right from my customer's mouth or would come from my customer's mouth. Um, that's a great question and kind of a leading question in a way in of itself. You probably knew that answer already, that you want to be using language that your customer recognizes and would use on their own, which is why testing this and talking about this and treating this like a hypothesis is helpful and important.
Thank you. Question number two. Please, can you guide us on how to avoid the trap of confusing what we do, e.g., benefits, with how we do it, e.g., methods and tools?
That's a great question. Um, uh, Well, I mean, even in your question there, you gave a couple categories of ways to start splitting that up. I think from the highest level, you can think about the outcomes, what the ending to the happy story is after you do your work, outcomes that they get, changes in their business, numbers that are changed, people that have different ways of working. That's the outcome and the benefit. And then what you do, you want to use language that does a few things that tells them how they can work with you. Like I work with companies, you can hire me on a part-time basis as a fractional. You can hire me for a workshop. I'll come in and do this in a one-off basis with you. Or you can hire me in any number of nameable ways. That's how I do the work. Um, Further details under that would be things that you named, like tools I use and approaches and more methodologies that I am particularly fond of. Um, but I find that the how I do the work, kind of my core services, the fractional workshop coaching stuff, kind of comes last. It comes after we've like, I understand, you understand that I understand the problem that you're facing, and you understand that I understand that what I will do to get you there, the methodologies, the approaches, the outcomes are what you really want. Great. We all are nodding our heads there. Cool. This is how you can work with me. You can hire me fractionally, hire me for workshop, whatever.
And last question from the chat, and then we can move on to opening up to the floor. How do I articulate the value of ideation and brainstorming when it's very embedded in the work that I do? For example, I got hired for a comms role, but I always ended up being a sounding board for several things, and I learned through the tech language that's like a founder's associate role.
Okay, good question. There's like a specific question there about um, how do I build a service around being an ideating thought partner to a
Mhm.
founder? And then there's another question about like, what's a founder's associate? Maybe that's a second question in there. Um, that main question, I'll broaden because maybe this is a few of you. If you're looking at your piece of paper and you're saying, I've got things down here that I know I'm really good at, and I've done a really good job at a bunch of times. I'd encourage you to look at that as one part of the puzzle. Um, let me see if I can grab this link again. This workshop is like kind of loosely based on a Substack I wrote that has, and here's that Substack. Inside, there's a my version of Ikigai, if you're familiar with the concept, my version of independent work Ikigai, which is how you take the big laundry list of things that you're really, really excellent at and look holistically at what's on the table here. So I want to encourage you to look at things you're excellent at, things you want to do more of, And the third leg in that Ikigai Venn diagram is things the market will pay for. The overlap of all three is like the cupcake sweet spot there of really maybe what you could go test out and do independently. Um, the what the market could pay for piece, really hard to do alone in your guest bedroom, staring at your laptop screen. So you really want to take your best guess at what those offerings might be, and you want to go talk to people about them and get some input on, hey, are these problems that you really have? How do you talk about these problems? Um, so to answer your question, I'm the worst person to tell you how to talk about ideation. The only and best person to tell you how to talk about ideation is your potential customer. Use the words that they use. Hear if they really want to pay for it. And if they don't, then maybe that's a data point that like, oh, I actually don't know if this is something I can really monetize and take out. Let's move on to the next set of ideas.
Mm. We have about 5 minutes. If anyone would like to come off mute, feel free, be brave, and come and ask Shayna what's on your mind.
Shaina, I had a quick question for you because I'm coming from the public sector, from like all realms, school teacher, military, local government. So when you say customer, I gotta really like shift my mind frame to okay, the person that I'm offering my services to.
Yes.
My question to you, and it kind of links back to what we talked about, like methodology, like an approach. Like when that, at least for me, has been the thread through my professional life being able to go inside a system, see how things actually work, and then see the difference between the official narrative and like how things actually trickle down to on the ground floor level, whether that's like as a teacher, knowing how things actually work in the classroom, military, and the local government with like how decisions are made. How does that, and I do believe it transfers over to the private sector, like how would I repackage that to a name or a label, or if that's even the strategy, I should go ahead with that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's an incredible skill, and there's many paths you could take with this. Just because you haven't worked for a particular customer or in a particular environment before, doesn't mean you can't very successfully spin up your own business where you do it now. Marketers call this, it's like the old phrase that's name it and claim it. If you've heard this one before, meaning like, Seth, if I'm in your shoes, I'd like do some soul searching and have a lot of conversations and start to pick that industry or sector or all the characteristics of the customer you want to go work with in this next phase, and then name it and claim it. I work with this customer. I do this type of work with them. Um, because it sounds like you're going to make a big jump from never having worked with this type of customer before and in a new role, maybe not a teacher anymore or not in the military service anymore, but now doing some sort of operations work for a business is what I think you're implying. Um, you'll probably have a lot more research to do to really articulate what that role is called and to put yourself in front of customers. But if you're successful, name it and claim it. I do this work. I've done it before. Here's all the environments where I learned how to do this. Um, just because you haven't done something before doesn't mean you can't successfully start a business around it in the future. Um, so I think that maybe indirectly speaks to what you're talking about, but I hope was helpful.
No, no, it was absolutely. Thank you. I was gonna have a new question now, spinning off from that. Because at least from like what I've seen in my own personal life, the power of AI and LLMs using language to speak things in your own vernacular or however you speak, and then using AI and resources of the internet and all that, being then given like new concepts and ideas that you were always grasping for but never had before. So I was kind of curious if you use any of that in your own work.
Um, do I use AI to help me kind of give voice to new ideas or new concepts? Sometimes. For me, where AI is every day a core part of my work are the systems behind what makes my business run. Financial systems, organizational systems, help with my inbox, which is like a hot dumpster fire of a mess at all times, help with sales work. So I haven't used AI in that way, but I'm excited to. We should chat if you've got some direction for me.
Cool.
Well, let's see, everybody. Millie, I think we've got a minute left here. So maybe with that, everybody, I'm so thankful that I could come and chat with you guys today. I love hanging out with the Generalist World crew. What I will do, I'm going to shameless plug this bad boy on my way out the door. If you want to keep doing stuff like this and building your independent work, we're in the last couple days to apply for manual override. Come check it out. Come to attend our info session tomorrow night. I'd love to meet more of you there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along and sticking around. That was packed. Feel free to share what you've learned on socials. Tag Shaina, tag me, tag Generalist World, and we will help amplify. And really appreciate everyone taking the time. Have a great evening,
See everybody.
morning,
Bye-bye.
afternoon, wherever you are. Bye bye.